Good morning. My name is Anshul. We spoke earlier last week, and this is maybe the title of this could be reversed because it's a lot more about how to do project management in GitHub, and it's a lot more about GitHub than it is project management principles. A little bit about me. There we go. I work at SSEEK, which stands for the Scientific Software Engineering Center. We are a center based in the eScience Institute. These are some of our projects you'll see up here. They're in conservation ecology, seismology, some in spectroscopy. It's pretty exciting. If you'd like to find out more, you can scan the code, and these slides will also be in your curriculum folder, so you can take a bigger look there. In general, my philosophy with project management is that it's a lot more about getting the work done than anything. So you shouldn't try and focus too much on it and only really consider how it can serve your ends. And to that effect, if you could take a second to read this quote, you might find it instructive. So the idea, if is everybody pretty much done reading? The idea is that the more and more you try and perfect a process like this, the more and more it's useless. And we don't want to do that today. Anytime you feel like this is over-engineered or you're spending too much time on it, I won't be offended, and your team will be grateful if you just abandon it and do what helps you get your work done. These is just tools and nothing more. I don't think this is about principles. I don't think this is about a certain way of doing your work. It's just giving you options to help you organize. This is originally a story by Lewis Carroll, which was then adapted by Jorge Luis Borges, and Neil Gaiman also adapted it. It's a nice kind of vignette. These are our goals today, to portion our tasks amongst one another, to plan out the work over a time period, write down that time period, track our progress, and organize in general. And these are kind of the main principles that I try to adhere to when I do this with our team at SSEEK. If something is too complicated, nobody's going to stick to it. You need to have consensus amongst your team and communicate to achieve that consensus, and give it around one work cycle before you label something as really useful or really useless. And to that effect, try and iterate across work cycles. Okay, this worked for us last time, this didn't. Let's try bringing this in. But don't abandon anything too quickly in poor faith. So to begin with, we're going to talk about issues. And can everybody open up that geometry repo? It should be in Slack. You won't really do anything on there until a couple minutes from now, but just so you have a reference for some of the screenshots that I'll put up here. So you can think of issues. Pardon me if this screenshot is too small, but you can think of them as your smallest units of work. It's a task that one person can do in a reasonable amount of time. And in the context of projects that take 10 weeks, maybe this is something that could take you a week. In the context of Neurohack Academy, it might be something that takes you a couple hours, or it should be, rather. And it doesn't have to be something that results in a pull request to the repository. It can be a presentation. It can be someone going and sourcing some information from someplace else. It can be documentation. It doesn't have to be code. The question you're trying to answer is, what specifically am I working on right now? You'll find that at the top tab in your repository right next to code. Once you click on that tab, you'll be taken to a screen like this. If there aren't any open issues, and you'll see a green button in the top right, wherein you can create a new issue, and you want to be detailed in filling that out. Which brings me to the last screenshot, wherein you'll write a title, which should be descriptive, and we'll get to the nomenclature behind that in a second, and also include a short description. This is coming up on that fine line of, is it too much work for me to organize my work? Why don't I just do it? So try and keep your descriptions brief, and if you feel like they're bogging you down, you can even write it in shorthand, as long as your teammates achieve consensus and understand what you're trying to do. And I will note that in open source contribution repos that are worked on across the world by hundreds, thousands of people, the standards of communication are going to be far higher than in a setting like this, where you would know everybody for a week and it's only a week-long project. You'll be expected, if you do open source contribution, to write not at length, but in detail and clearly in these fields, so that people who you don't talk to or you don't have to talk to can work with you. This is the general nomenclature you're trying to follow in that final portion on the right. You want to give a general idea of what category the issue falls in. We have a feature, we have bug fixes, documentation. You could be making a stylistic change. You could put a chore that doesn't even have to do with code. You could be reverting. You could be writing tests. And you're going to want to include that and then colon the name of the issue. So anybody who's scrolling through the issues can quickly see what type of task you've portioned out. So issues fall under milestones, as you see here. They're just chunks of work that are larger. You can do a milestone. I recommend doing it temporally. What do we want to get done by the end of today? What do we want to get done by the end of Tuesday? Or you could do it by person. But I'll get to assigning issues a bit later. And I feel that setting milestones per person is a poor use of their capabilities. You can set deadlines on these, and you can track progress to see what percentage of the milestone I've achieved. You're going to find those in the same issues tab, but the blue portion you see on the top left is split between labels and milestones, and you can click on it. And once you do, it'll give you an option to create a new milestone, which again is just a chunk of issues, usually time bound. So assigning is just who's responsible for an issue. Very simple, and you can do it like so. Go ahead and click on an issue. This is an example actually from a repository that we worked on at SSEEK called Caustics, which is for gravitational lensing, where you basically use how large celestial objects bend space-time to understand how you see the light that comes your way. And this is a refactor. As you can see, it's been tagged, and somebody has opened it 2 weeks ago. And if I wanted to take on that issue, this is quite common in open source contribution. You'll go to a repository, you'll click on the list of open issues, you'll find one that suits you or interests you, you'll click on it and assign it to yourself like so. Once you click on the issue, you'll be brought to the screen on your right, and you'll have an option to type in your name. There's also other options on the right, like milestones, which you can imagine are where you can drop your issue into a bucket. So in most of these collaborative settings you'll be in, and kind of the best practice that I recommend, you want your branches to live and die with issues. When you create an issue, or when you take on work from an issue, create a branch for that issue. It keeps your work modular and ensures that you're not out of scope and breaking things when you work on what you're doing. That way, if something does go wrong, it's quite easy to trace where that happened and to revert the commit or the PR that led to it. So this is where you can do that. Once you've created an issue, there'll be a place to create a branch in the bottom right. You can also do this ex post, wherein you have a branch and then you realize, okay, I think I know what I'd like to work on here. And you can tag or link an issue to that branch. And it's far more intuitive for everybody else keeping track of the work that's being done. So discussion threads are an underrated and simple, but rather important feature of this. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to enable basically worldwide collaboration and contribution. which is kind of the pride and joy of platforms like GitHub, where you don't have to know someone, you don't even have to speak the same language as them, and you can communicate clearly using discussion threads on anything from an issue to a PR to a branch, and that's really, really useful. So it's imperative that you communicate. This is a really cool project that we worked on at SSEEK called Offshore Geodesy, where there's 3 instruments in the ocean, one on the floor, one on the water level, and a satellite. And you use correlations between the 3 to track subsea tectonic plates and try and predict tsunamis, things like that. We finished up the project and released it. And there was a new experiment going on in kind of the North Pacific, wherein they had some problems with the transponders. So our collaborator, John, opened up a bug, as you see here, and he's discussing with Don, one of our developers at SSEEK, what he thinks is going wrong, copying and pasting logs. They don't have to schedule a meeting. They don't have to have an email thread. They don't have to do this over Slack. And what's more important is that if anybody has the same issue later on, there's a clear written record of the work that's already been done and why. Once you're done working on an issue, taking a branch out, discussing it, and making commits to your branch, it's ready for inclusion in the main and review. So the key term here is mentioning. GitHub is neat in that it's always poring over your text, not in a surveillance way. Well, maybe in a surveillance way, but it's always poring over your text for tags. Tags of people, tags of issues, tags of PRs, tags of branches. And the way you do that is just post the link in your description. You just write down, I'm working on issue number, boom. Or I am completing issue number, boom. Or this pull request completes issue, etc. And you can also assign PRs for review to people in your team. So let's say someone knows what work needs to be done and you agree upon it, they create an issue, you work on it. Once you do that, you can make a PR, and you can see that this is what the branch would look like. You make a PR and you can ask them to review. That'll be on that same, if I come here, this panel on the side, it'll look very similar to that. And you can ask someone to review your PR. So mentioning, as I just did, is the tie that binds each of the structures. So once you have an issue, PR, or a branch, to link them, all you need to do is mention one in the text of another. When I say text, I mean this discussion thread, I mean the title, or I mean this description. So I will pause here for questions before you attempt to do the same yourselves. I can also see online if there's. All right. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier, where you can, as you see in the top, somebody mentions issue number 23 in the PR, and then you're good to go. And once you close it, it'll keep record of that. Okay, your turn. So what we'll do first is we'll split into teams. For the folks online, Noah will break you out into rooms. For the folks here, if you can just collaborate with 2 or 3 people next to you, whatever seems reasonable. You can go into the geometry repo, which you find in the Slack. And if somebody could volunteer to create a milestone, that'd be, I'll give you, how about this? I'll give you 2 minutes to split into teams, move around as you need to, and then we'll create a milestone.
Okay, I'm opening the breakout rooms.
Wait, am I supposed to join room 5?
No,
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
That's right. Hey, actually, you're gonna get more instruction.
Yes.
Let me just close it.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, you tell them on Zoom that. Put them back in the quick break.
Oh, yeah. So for the folks on Zoom, you'll be placed back into the main room for a second while I give a couple more instructions. And then we'll disperse. It's okay for them to create issues and mess around with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it's for.
It's over the demo.
Okay. All right.
There's still a few students who got into it.
And they're coming back out. Yeah. Good. My bad.
Give it 17 seconds. And they'll be back.
Sir.
They'll be ready.
Okay, perfect. I think what I might do. Let me figure this out. Okay, is everybody on this repository? All right, so I'm going to create the milestone, which, as you know, you can do like so. Milestones, just to review the way I did that again. I'm in the repository. I go to issues. I go to milestones. And I'm going to create a new one. Oh, I don't know if I have access to create milestones. There we
You
go.
need to be in you need to be part of the org.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works.
What's your good user? Actual.
ATAMBAY 37.
ATAMBAY
37, yeah.
35. Okay. Sorry. Oh, two-factor authentication. Okay, this shouldn't be an issue for the others because they're already members of.
Yeah, that's what I figured, yeah.
Should you need to accept the invitation.
I need to accept the invitation, okay.
Yeah, so you need to go.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. It didn't even let me see issues before. It's cool. Oh, still won't let me create one. No, maybe I'll just get a volunteer. I can just get a volunteer. Or can you create one?
I think.
Yeah, if you can just call it PM tutorial or something like that. Thank you. PM tutorial. Nice. All right. So Ariel kindly has created a milestone for us. And you can find that, as I was mentioning, if you go to issues and then go to milestones, there's a milestone here. There's one issue, which I also just created, and I can access that in the main issues tab. If you click on it, you'll see here that it's assigned to the PM tutorial milestone. You can also assign someone to it. Then you can also create a branch for it. All the things that I mentioned. Now, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to do it amongst yourselves. And here, let me get the screen share. 1 second. Okay, perfect. Everybody's split into teams. We've created the milestone. And now you're going to want to do the following. Ignore Naomi here. That was someone who I presented this with in the past. But you can assign it to pretty much anybody, or you can assign it to Ariel or Noah. This is all just for demo, but you're going to want to write the issue, as I showed earlier, assign it amongst yourselves, create a branch for it, make some sort of change to the code, finish it, talk about it in the discussion, post a couple things back and forth, and then open a PR. So, does anybody have any questions? You have plenty of time to do this. Don't be in any rush, make mistakes, and I'll be walking around helping, as well as Noah will be in the Zoom. Does anybody have any questions?
Breakout rooms, they can raise their hand in the breakout rooms also.
Okay, if you're in the breakout room, you can raise a hand and people outside of it will be able to see and help you out. Any other questions? No. That's a good question.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Yeah, of course, of course. Go ahead. Oh, to whoever online just said, can they ask a question? You can ask. Yeah.
Sure, that's me. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were pointing to someone in the audience. Should we do some of the work locally or should we just do everything on GitHub?
Yeah, if you feel comfortable completing these steps on your local build, then that's totally fine. As long as it's represented on GitHub and people can track the work through discussions and a pull request, and there's evidence of the issue being created, yeah, I don't see why not. Just to address the previous question about forking, that is kind of a more accepted way of doing it in the open source community, wherein you make an entire copy that's distinct and comes with its own workflow. For the purposes of this assignment, and I feel the purposes of this week, branches are far simpler. And in forking, you would not. Well, I can just go over that real quick. It's interesting and important. In forking, you have a whole new repo to yourself, and then you follow all these steps. I know that sounds redundant, but it makes it far easier to track work across, and you can still have access to all the issues that people are working on the main fork. And you just create a copy of the repository, and then you can work on multiple issues by creating multiple branches yourself. If you take evidence of that work across the world into one repository, it'll be a mess. That's why people fork. And it creates an additional layer of installation so that maintainers and people who are responsible for reviewing pull requests into these massive open source repositories are able to bring work in a structured manner. And it makes it a little bit easier to assign credit for contributions and things like that. There's great guides, and I'll actually link to one at the end of the presentation on how to do this open source forking workflow properly. So that's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, do your thing. And if it wasn't clear, this issue should be in the milestone that Ario created. That way you can practice including it in the milestone. Sorry.
I'm assuming we are fair game. That was reported.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Don is both more safer and more, but that's also because he rides on the highway. I haven't ridden on the highway. I probably do twice a year. Yeah, yeah. Oh, do you also ride? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So now, to complete this milestone.
Yes. Yes, I can show that. Yeah.
So this won't be this full.
So here you'll see, once you create an issue, you should have this option in the bottom right to create a branch. And if you don't, I can come check it out.
So someone on Slack said, an issue that we don't see. The gear next to the same.
It might be a permission. Can I assign issues? That's a good question. Just one second, just a second. Nice. No, I cannot.
So, next question.
Are people able to assign issues? Oh, so it's a permissions thing. On this repository, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're probably right.
I can make the repo. I think I know what I need to do.
Okay, we're changing the permissions real quick. Were you able to see the branching? No, but you're earlier about branch. Were you able to- Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, the participants team should now be able to do everything on this. Everything, but most of it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Earl. Sorry about that. I should have preempted this with check with the result.
No problem, mate.
I think next time what I'll do,
This section is super helpful because now I know to anticipate the things that will come up.
yeah, I think next time what I'll do is
Like
I'll
we need
create.
teams and we need like, team like.
Yeah.
I actually need to make.
Oh, that's why you're thinking.
They're all, everyone is in a participant team.
Yeah.
So we just need to give this picture. We need to allocate.
Yeah. I think what I'll do is I teach in the setting that's not this or not the you will have home read both. I think it's a great one.
I mean, I think part of it is just the story. Get up and come. A lot more complicated.
Yeah, that's the problem. We're gonna put a light on it, link it with a example. Yeah. Oh, perfect. I kind of hope so. Yeah.
Should give them just a smaller repository maintain. Our customer, right? We have to be pretty quiet and then cost. Right, that's not access. Our customer admin. So our customer.
Yeah, I don't know why, because see, that's a new thing that came to GitHub since I gave this,
Okay, that's like new since like last night.
yeah, literally since the beginning of summer. So two quick things. One is that, when you do create a pull request, the way that you link it to an issue, if you remember, is that you're gonna be, mentioning it, just the number of the issue. So every issue is gonna come with a number regardless of the title. And in the body of the pull request, just mention it anywhere. You can even mention it in the title. You can change any of the text fields. If you mention the issue, it'll be linked quite nicely. That way, once you close it and someone approves it, they'll know what it was fixing. The second thing is that a lot of people, when doing this, have gotten the three different options for how to create the branch. I honestly don't think it matters which one is which. Even though it says check out, start in a code space, it's not actually going to spin up a code space for you. We had a group that just did that. So any of the three is fine. I explained the difference earlier. You'll see check out locally, which is basically what I expected to happen. Wherever you're editing this repository, it'll create a new branch. You have GitHub Desktop, which is just the same thing, but using a GUI, which that's what GitHub Desktop is instead of the terminal. And then you have code space, which I think only creates an online copy, nothing on your local yet. So that's the difference. I apologize for that confusion.
Explain that again.
Yeah. There's two people still. There's a yes kind of button. I asked the first one to be because you're on the tab. If you're getting out, you might yeah, I can slap you there.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, yes.
You can do that.
Okay, I'll come in a second. Thank you.
In this setting, the breakouts are.
Okay.
Actually, if you
Okay.
mind if we just had you unplugged from the projector?
Yeah, of
And
course.
then you can jump into breakout room 2. I think I can assign you there 1 second.
Okay, awesome.
Move to Zoom 2. Okay, so if you join a breakout room.
There are people who are members of the
Oh, wait, I haven't. Did I?
Real quick, this is the milestone that we're supposed to be assigning the issues to. We have 32 open issues, but only 16 were in here. So real quick to review, if you're in an issue, make sure like you go like so and assign it to a milestone and also to someone to work on.
There's confound. I like to do that anyway. And there's laps. There's laps that you can have again. That invite. The script that I wrote actually added into this team at the same time. Anyway,
Oh, that. They accept our mission.
Let me know. For the first draft, I'm drafting. It should be good to go. Oh, thank you. So yes, those are good. You have online, so
to be called vote. Anytime the changes are made, that's to be called the local. So working on the remotes, a commit is just a change that you're committing to on the remote version of the screen. Now, what you're asking is how do I make it forward, but or not, the motion would be if you have a look. So let's say you have a local copy. Yeah. Yeah. You're critical. So go back to the issue with the grant credit one. I wanted to teach a little about the conflicts because there's probably. Oh, no. Okay, thank you. No, I just think there'll be one merging too many. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I thought that someone else, yeah. Well, okay, I'll come. This is your grant, right? Where you're gonna do training. And I'll tell you. Oh, you need to make it. So you can make a change more. Make a change and then it'll stay.
Safe environment.
Yeah, that, you could, but for the purpose of this exercise, that it's not a comparison. Yeah, you can do whatever you like, and then you can contribute critical requests, what you need to make sure. The body and the rules. But that. Yes, the number of the created, and then it'll show you that I was right. Yeah, of course. What is the change? Go back to me. Oh, you don't have oh, you already made the change already. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but it's linked to it. Oh, because it's not different, right? What you can do is that you go back to page, wherever it is in the browser, find that commit. And then if you can find that push for that commit, if you can comment on it, and then write down the name of the issue, that'd be nice. Oh, go back and get it. Oh. Okay, is that anything? But it's very good. That's the nice thing about LinkedIn is that it's a very soft and easy way to tie records together. That way, even if something like this happens where you push directly to me, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to leave a record. Yes, sorry.
I'm going to send you into room one here.
Yes, sir.
But we also had a question, what's the difference between putting a user as a reviewer versus an assignee? Oh, that's just a title difference, it's not.
Yeah, also you can't have a reviewer on an issue, you'd have a reviewer on a.
Generally, bring everyone together and show them there's a nice issue with some code implementation and some
Number 20.
conflicts, and maybe just kind of show them how
Perfect. And is it tagged? Oh, it is tagged. Perfect. So not tagged, linked. Yeah.
it linked to this, yeah.
Okay, so number 20.
Number 74.
Number 74.
is the issue.
So,
Okay, I'll join Zoom room 1 and then do that.
and then we can bring them all back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do
perfect.
that.
Thank you.
Mario, the one you said was called 74 or 47?
Any of these will demonstrate, it's just fine, any one of these will demonstrate the mess.
Yeah.
74 is.
Okay.
It's got like code. It's got-
Is it in the milestone? It is, right? Okay. If everybody could slowly direct their attention here, that would be great. I'm going to go over an example issue. So that was probably a little bit chaotic following these steps. So I appreciate your patience. And I know a couple groups had some inconsistencies in linking, which kind of giveth and it taketh, right? It's easy to link things because it's literally just a regex where you drop in a number, but it taketh because sometimes that doesn't work for some reason, and it's kind of difficult to know why because it's not really a setting that runs with each issue. But here's an example of something where they made a commit on their branch to create a function. They changed this file. They had a conversation that described, oh, my bad, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Yeah, that's bad, sorry. Okay, sorry, just to review, this is for the folks online, my apologies. They made a change in the form of a commit. They had a file wherein they put in this new function, that's the commit. Then in the conversation, ideally there's some more, I mean, this is just a preference, but they could have talked about it over here, and they didn't need to, but then they describe exactly what's going on. And once they're done, they linked it, which is nice. There's also this description, which we appreciate. And then Ariel gives them a star. They requested review from me, and Ariel made the review. Just real quick, there's a distinction between assignee and reviewer. Reviewers allow your work to come back in the form of a pull request, and assignees work on the issues themselves. So this is a pull request, and someone can review it. you can't really review an issue. You can just be assigned to it. And this has merge conflicts. Merge conflict is essentially the idea that what you're trying to bring in is so distinct in a way that is going to break something from where you're trying to bring it that Git won't allow you to do so. And usually Git is, it's at its core, it's essentially just record keeping of addition and deletion. So when that record keeping fails, it asks you to make those decisions for it. And it says, this addition is in conflict with that deletion in this exact line. What do you want to do? Now you'll notice that that's happening a lot. And thank you to Ariel for merging all these in. The reason why we want branches to correspond to just one issue, and the reason why someone brought up forking earlier too, is to avoid merge conflicts and to keep our work distinct from one another and to ensure that dependencies are not breaking when you all bring your code together. But this is great. It's assigned to the milestone. You could assign it to this person who worked on it. That way we know. And it's assigned to reviewer. We can add Ariel because he's the one who actually reviewed it. And yeah, this is, it looks good. It looks good. And this is a, oh, he is. There we go. Perfect. So you'll see this is updating. And now if I were to merge this, you'll see here, the branch dies once the issue comes back into the fold, and the record will be maintained in the form of a pull request as well as the branch history, but you're going to want to go ahead and delete the branch. That way you can start up a new piece of work. What you don't want to do is go back to this branch, link it to another issue, and then keep doing work, because you're just adding layers and layers and layers, which are very confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this branch. I know it feels odd. Deleting in any sort of programming is an anxiety-inducing thing to do, but I can assure you here it's in your best interests. And it's liberating because that means you finished your work and there's more work to move on to, which is exciting. So to whoever wrote 74, I appreciate you letting me use this as an example. This is a lot of information. Oh, go ahead.
Never deleting anything when you delete the branch, just deleting like your reference.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. It's the whole point. Git is labeled as version control, but it's also version retention. I'd really like to emphasize that you're never really losing anything. There's a couple things I want to go over, which I should have, which cause can. Oh, go ahead. Because it's the branch is the issue and the issue is the branch. The issue is what work I am doing, a description, who's doing it, what milestone it lives in, etc. The branch is where that work is actually happening from a Git perspective. And I'll use that question briefly to answer a question that you also had earlier around remote. So Git can be confusing, period. But in this specific context, it can be confusing in that I talked earlier about the 3 different options it gives you when you create a branch. Local versus remote is also a differing copy thing. So if you create a branch and you check it out on your local, that means it's not represented on the internet at all. It's not here on the browser. It is in your local build. You make changes there. If someone else is also making changes there, you can pull them in, fetch, make those changes, etc. Then you push it. First you make a commit, then you push that commit to the remote version of that branch. Now on the internet, as it knows your branch, it has the changes you made on your computer. That's not a pull request. Then you want to pull from that branch into the main using a pull request, PR, and that's where you do this linking. So I should have covered the remote local thing. That's my bad. I know it can be a little confusing, but I imagine the majority of people here just did all their work in the browser, which is what's known as the remote. But But yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So, could you, please show again how to assign someone to?
How to assign someone from you, of course. So if I were to go to an issue here, and I'm trying to think. Okay, we can just go to a random pull request that doesn't have someone assigned for review. You can, once you go to the PR, click on reviewers, and you can find someone. Whoever's raising their hand on the Zoom, you can ask the question. Sorry.
That's okay, thank you. I was just gonna ask, why were we working on a milestone? Why was that not just a repository? I'm not sure I understand the idea of a milestone.
The idea of a what?
Of a milestone.
Sorry. A milestone is going to be a group of issues. So in, I can actually show you. I can actually show you in one of our real repositories. So this is super cool. Well, I think it's cool. All right. So here's another cool project we work on at Seek with one of our collaborators, Woo-Jung Lee, who's in the applied physics lab. And she does an incredible job of using GitHub for project management to the point where she rendered my role obsolete when we worked with her, which is nice. And to answer your question, a milestone for her team is a version release. She wants everything to do with 9.1, every issue that's related to their 9.1 release, which is also time limited. You can edit it and put a due date. I'm not going to do that, but wants everything having to do with it to be linked like so. So the reason we don't chunk work by issues into repo and rather have one more level of structure where we have a milestone is so that a repository, which ideally exists for a very long time as people do exactly this, make releases, is that you can time bound chunks of work and those individual pieces are issues. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
The online question, right? So I'm just wondering, who is it conventional to close the issues? Is that part of the reviewer's job? Like after they review the pull request and deem it to be acceptable to handle the issue, then they go in and close the issue? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say I don't want this to sound like an abdication, but it doesn't matter. If you work on it and you see your PR has been approved, the branch that lives with it is dead anyways. So you can close the issue. And there's going to be comments because it's linked that'll let people know that it's been accepted, the PR that corresponds to it. So the reviewer could do it or you could do it. That's something you can achieve consensus with on your team. Whatever you think is best. Go ahead. We had another question. Once you fetch, it should disappear. Yeah. Or, well, yeah, and then it'll ask, do you want to push it back up because it still exists on your local? So you can nuke it on your local as well. It's a little annoying. Any other questions? Okay. We can have a quick discussion and then I will get you out of here. So we covered this a little earlier with Ariel, but thank you. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah, my bad. Okay. So merging can be confusing and look like this. So that is why we keep our work modular and distinct and also be intentional in writing issues. You have the advantage of being in smaller teams wherein you can actually communicate before you write the issues to make sure there's no overlap, which leads to this. If you're editing the same file, you want to make sure you're editing distinct functions. And you kind of want to refrain from editing the same file in different branches, that can be cumbersome. And if you have a change that you're making to a function that another function depends on, you kind of want to be cognizant of that. And there's a really cool principle called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, wherein these things are tested as they're merged. But that's a quick note on Git merge, just so you're not shocked by the amount of conflicts. That's common when this many people are working kind of willy-nilly. Yeah, and this is just a place for you to express any thoughts you had, ask any other questions. We kind of already did this, but I'll open the floor again briefly. Okay. So this is Bed Bath and the Beyond. Task lists are essentially you creating checkboxes within an issue. I like to have issues be the smallest and most discrete unit of work. Some people don't feel that way. Some people like to collaborate on issues rather than on milestones. So the way that you do that, you can just go into an issue and there'll be an option in the text editing to add checkboxes. So that's some place you can do that. And in the checkboxes, you can link to other issues as well. GitHub projects is another tab in that same top pane where you're going to find code, issues, contributors, things like that. That's GitHub's kind of native project management. I don't use it. I think it's a little redundant, but it can be useful. And ZenHub is something that scrapes all your GitHub data and gives you some more traditional software engineering functionality for project management, like epics and things like that. If you have questions about these, I'll put my contact information at the end. There's a wealth of online resources as well. These are the principles we want to keep in mind. I know that simplicity might have been hard to come by when you were pinging between assignment and review and PRs and all these other things, but the more you can strip it down, the better. I know that you only have a week to do your work, and the less time you spend on this, the better. So if you feel something is dragging you down, scrap it and make sure you tell your team you're scrapping it and then move on. That's the second point there. And we spoke about this earlier. So I use this Andscape guide on GitHub for PM to help create this, which is great. GitHub Docs has some nice writing on linking, as well as a couple other of the functions that I showed here. You'll have these slides and you can go check them out. And I'll be on the Slack all week if you have questions, and I'll also be around until you finish your project selection and assignment later today. I find that the most questions I've had are usually right after people form groups and they're trying to achieve that consensus we spoke about earlier. So I'll be around to answer any questions. Other than that, I really appreciate your time and your patience. I know this can be a little cumbersome. Thank you.